Hi, I'm Wild Bill, and I'm going to talk just for a minute about the 4th of July, the American Independence Day. We won a war against Great Britain, against the English Empire, the British Empire. The sun never sets on the British Empire. We won a war against them. They practically owned India, they practically owned Australia, they practically owned any of a number of nations in the south of Africa. Wow. And they perpetrated some wonderful abuses against those people. You should read the history, how they treated the Zulus, how they treated the South Africans. But anyway, what I want to talk about is our grand and wonderful and amazing victory over the world's most powerful military forces. More powerful than the Russian army, more powerful than the French army, more powerful than the Spaniards, more powerful than the Prussians. Yeah. Yeah, the British Army. I mean, the British Army doesn't keep a large standing army, but they impress plenty of civilians when they need to, and they have a cadre of professional soldiers that they use to train those civilians into being excellent meat puppets. Here, grab this brown best musket, everybody stand in a line, dress right, so you're about an arm apart, so you have room to ram your balls down. And stand there and wait until we say fire and just kind of like pull your trigger. Don't have to aim because the brown best musket isn't very accurate. We just want a lot of balls in the air. Kind of like the Highland Fling, a lot of balls in the air. So anyway. And we had not a chance against the British Empire. Not one. We had no chance to win against them. We were a tiny little colony, a bunch of fractious and disagreeing people, and the people that perpetrated the revolution and tried to organize us as a separate independent kingdom and offering the crown to George Washington to be King George the First, in case people don't know this. These same guys that were like all for liberty and democracy, no, they weren't. They wanted George Washington to be king. They wanted a kingdom. They wanted a constitutional monarchy, just like England. True story. Anyway, so how do we affect this victory? We're a tiny little ragtag force of professionals trained by General von Steuben and a couple others, Prussians and other military trainers, because we didn't train our own troops. We had to hire outside professionals, just like Japan had done to upgrade her army and her fleet, just like other nations through the years. When they can't afford or don't have the traditions for their own, then they hire outsiders to come in and support them. So we, as a nascent nation of, like I said, fractious people, the various governors weren't friends of each other's mostly, and the different states had very different rules and very different laws. It was difficult to draw them all into one anything. But the nascent nation of the United States went up against Great Britain, the biggest military power on earth, the one that could operate the farthest from its land in significant numbers. Enough numbers to defeat all comers, as a matter of fact. That was their plan. The British believed that their fleet should be equal to the fleets of the next two nations down. And that's how they maintained superiority, by controlling trade across the seas with numerical and training superiorities. Technical superiorities are fleeting. But your tradition, as has been said before about the British, that that if you lose your men, you can replace them. If you lose your ships, you can replace them. But a tradition, like don't back down, takes generations and generations to build. And you don't want to lose that the most of all. That's the problem, where these ghosts of ideas make us die in large numbers for people that use them to motivate us. But neither we nor they really know what they mean. Getting back to the American Revolution, this is an important point for me. I'm sorry I'm dithering so much before I get to it. We didn't win the Revolutionary War. We did not win the Revolutionary War. We did not win the Revolutionary War. The Revolutionary War wasn't a Revolutionary War at all. It was a sideshow in the French and English War that was going on and had been going on for years and years and would go on for years and years. Yeah. And without France transporting our arms to us and transporting military aid to us in various ways and supporting our blockade runners and allowing people like Ben Franco to get a little foreign stuff because he was big into that, which kept him away from our women. It was all France. Without the French-English War, the United States of America would have never happened. Could not possibly have happened. The British pretty much proved that in 1812. They had, in any moment, enough power to crush us utterly, to march us all into concentration camps, which, by the way, the British invented in the south of Africa during the Boer Wars, and and treat us any way they liked, make us their bitch. The only reason they didn't do that, because they wanted to, was because they had bigger fish to fry, and that bigger fish to fry was France. France was contending with them in Canada for control of a vast area of resources and things like mastwood for their ships, big deal, up in Canada. And also in India, which was the largest potential trade market as long as you weren't above scrupling to enslave people. Without France fighting the British tooth and nail all around the world in the Mediterranean, big area there, lots of civilizations that can be swept into your corner, and you can rape them economically, which is what the basic war between France and Great Britain was. In case you guys don't know this, this is what the Napoleonic War was all about. It is the imposition of the continental economic system instead of the English imperial economic system. The English wanted all trade to move through London or English ports, where it would be taxed. There's a stamp, bang, cost you a penny. Remember the tea tax? Yeah. So anyway, the French and everyone else in the world except for the English believed that that was dumb, stupid, go away, don't bother us, you don't own our land, don't tell us what to do with it. And the British would enforce their demands with military action again and again and again and again, unilaterally just invading people whenever Great Britain felt like it. Great Britain has been the most distrustable nation ever. They have just acted in the most arbitrary, unnatural, and unegalitarian fashion all through history. They are the perpetrators of most of the great ills that we are saddled with today. Great Britain and the people that formulate the strategy for Great Britain's dominance over the world. Till the middle of my century, the 20th century, Great Britain was the dominant power in the world. Dominant over Imperial Russia, Soviet Russia, dominant over us. There was talk in the 1920s that the next war, the next world war, was going to come between the United States of America and Great Britain and the British Empire, but you guys don't know that. True story. It was a big deal at one time. That's where our war games in the Imperial College in Great Britain, and also here at BMI in the Naval Institute in Annapolis, these were all running simulations to see if we could beat Great Britain in a war. Not Germany, not Japan, not Russia, not the Soviet Union. Great Britain. Because British can't be trusted. And really, their little island should have been burned to the ground long ago and the people distributed out amongst the world. They are that troublesome. You don't have to believe me. Read the history of India, please. Read up on the history of India, please. Just read up on the history of India, please. And then when you're done with that, read up on the history of the United States and why we went to war against the British. And while you're at that, read on the history of Australia and how Australia started out, which is exactly how America started out, penal colonies. The British say, hey, we're tired of you, so we're just going to throw you out over the wall, Coventry. So our 4th of July was where we celebrate the French kicking the British out of the United States of America. It's not how we present it because the press lies. It's not how we present it because the political system lies. It can't help itself. It can't help itself. Once it starts to lie, Those lies just snowball and snowball and snowball. And now George Washington cut down a cherry tree but admitted it and took the spanking because he didn't want people to think he was a liar. Well, he'd rather be a vandal than a liar. Okay? So we make these stories up. And then we make up new ones to explain those. We make up new ones to explain those. So patriotism becomes a bad religion based on falsehood, based on utter falsehood. George Washington had to turn down the presidency. He turned down the presidency, I think, twice. He turned down the king's crown from a victorious Continental Congress. He turned that crown down. Do you know why? Because the British had not long ago murdered one of their kings because they were pissed at him. And if George had taken the crown, it was an era where the British king was killed. The French king would soon be killed. George himself might be killed because his different state governors did not agree with a lot of his policies. America, as I said, is full of very fractious people. So our great political experiment is a false story, is a false narrative, because it wasn't. We wanted a constitutional monarchy just like Great Britain, which Great Britain had gone through a terrible civil war to obtain. This mandate that the king wasn't in charge of the continent anymore. The king wasn't in charge of the country anymore. The king was not in charge of the empire anymore. Things would be done in the king's name, but that's the same as saying things are done because of manifest destiny. We want to do them, and we're doing them, and we just put that stamp on it, that's all. So our victory in the War of Independence wasn't really a victory, nor was it a war of independence. The British did not call it the War of the American Secession, which they very easily could have. It was just a minor rebellion like the ones in Haiti and Cuba and Puerto Rico and every place the British enslaved and murdered at will and abused the people as best they could, in India, in Afghanistan, in Turkey, Asia Minor. Anybody remember the Charge of the Light Brigade? Read up on that Crimean War and see why the British were there, what they had to defend. So we didn't have a Revolutionary War, and our patriots did not win a Revolutionary War against the British. And the major victories that took place around us that ensured our survival as a nation were due to France, and France alone. And France's great war with the United States, with Great Britain. And, of course, today now France is a trope. We make fun of them and say they're cowards and they're traitors and they're turncoats. Because our press has forgotten how we really achieved our independence. Our press can't be trusted to teach us because our press lies, because it got into spinning narratives to move us with these wonderful impulses. But those emotions we're feeling are based on lies. Lies that a bunch of unscrupulous men at the top perpetrated just so we think we're better than the rest of the world. You mean it isn't good enough that we're the good guys? Well, I've been reading history. It turns out we're not the good guys. We present ourselves as the good guys, just like we present ourselves as the victors in the War of American Independence, which wasn't. It was a world war between France and Great Britain. And we were a tiny sideshow in this world war. Just want to let you know. So when you're ready to support American independence, and you're ready to say Happy Independence Day, tell the French thank you. That's right. Stop making fun of them. Because they're the ones who created our nation and gave it shape and gave it a future. Thanks.